We good? Well, we're finally going. Ken told everybody in his sermon last week that I was going to try a live stream. Well, I have tried it. It didn't work. I don't know why. I'll figure it out at home. I don't know what's up with it. So I'll do it the old-fashioned way today. But beautiful outside. Glad we're together. We had a good trip to Pennsylvania. That's why I did that sermon at home from my desk, because I didn't announce Merritt and that he had passed. I didn't announce that we wouldn't be here the last day of unleavened bread. I forgot everything last week. But going up and saying goodbye to our friend Merritt was truly an honor and a pleasure to do. His family was beautiful. It's wonderful to meet him. They reminded me of him, and I appreciated that. I sure did. We had to rent the car a day early because our local enterprise was closed, so we left a day early and swung into D.C. That was pretty amazing. It really was. We didn't even scratch the surface on what to do. Then left from there because his daughter had told me when she was looking at flights that D.C. and Pittsburgh was about the same distance. He said they're only 2.5 hours from D.C. That's why we swung through there. But buddy, I tell you what, we walked a lot in Washington, D.C. I was done. By the time we was finished, I was done. And it had to end on a sour note because of the stinking egg roll was going on. So you couldn't get to the White House. It was all gated, fenced off. The entire perimeter was fenced off. And we walked and walked and walked trying to figure it out. So we finally stopped and talked to a Secret Service agent. He's about the 5th person now we talked to. And he's the only one that had any sense about him that said, no, he said the whole thing is fenced off. He said, you can see it from like 2 or 3 blocks away if you walk over here to this certain point. And I looked at her and I said, we'll see it next time. I walked all I'm walking. I was done. But the highlight of it for me was the National Archives. When I went in and I saw the original Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. That's what separates our country from other countries in the world, are those 3 documents. And those 3 documents are so underappreciated in today's society. They don't even know what they mean. They're clueless, have no idea now. And I took the moment to teach Joseph. I said, every man that signed that document, the Declaration of Independence, signed their own death warrant. Every one of them. They knew when they put their names on that paper they was committing treason against the British Crown. And they still did it. That took faith, strength, and courage to be able to do that. And that's how this nation was founded. And God told us in the Word that He was going to fulfill all the promises to Abraham. And He did. I'm not going to get into that today, but we just celebrated the days of unleavened bread. And, of course, we already talked about everything that Christ went through during that week. But, when you talk about strength and courage, how much strength and courage did it take for Him to complete the mission? Once again, I like to remind people, He was flesh and blood just like we are. And many of the disciples would suffer persecution after His resurrection. We're going to read about it a little bit in Acts, the 12th chapter. I'm going to tie all of this in today to appreciating our freedom and what it truly means. And you'll see. Acts, the 12th chapter, it said, about that time Herod the king laid violent hands on some who belonged to the church. He killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. When he saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to arrest Peter also. This was during the days of unleavened bread. When he had seized him, he put him in prison, delivering him over to 4 squads of soldiers to guard him, intending after the Passover to bring him out to the people. So Peter was kept in prison, but earnest prayer was made to God by the church. So we see Herod was persecuting anybody who was a Christian. He had already killed James. And it looks like he was politicking. And why do I say that? It said because when he saw it pleased the crowd, then he upped his efforts, is what the scripture says. So he was politicking. Modern politicians don't do that, do they? They'll tell you anything during election cycle, won't they?
Yeah.
Of course they will. So they got Peter. Now what was all of these people guilty of right here? What crime did they commit? They were Christians. That was their only crime. They hadn't broken any laws other than what the Pharisees and Sadducees had set out. That's all they were guilty of. So during that time, it took faith and strength and courage to be a Christian. And we'll see here in a little bit, it takes that still today, even if it's of the most nominal. In the 6th verse, it says, when Herod was about to bring him out on that very night, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with 2 chains, and sentries before the door guarding the prison. I always like to stop there because I admire Peter's faith. To me, it's admirable that you know you're going to die in a few hours and you could care less. You're just sleeping. I think it was, on the last day of Unleavened Bread in Ken Hartbarger's sermon, one thing I liked what he said. He said, people that are in God's church, the fear of death goes away.
Oh, yeah.
And it's because you know what happens. You know the truth of it. And you know what waits you at the flip side. That's truth right there. It's a whole lot different when you have a world tomorrow to look forward to. It's a whole lot different. It said, behold, an angel of the Lord stood next to him, and a light shone in the cell, and he struck Peter on the side and woke him, saying, get up quickly, and his chains fell off of his hands. Once again, I'm allergied out of this world, so you'll have to excuse coughing or anything else. He said, dress yourself, put on your sandals, and he did so. And he said to him, wrap your cloak around you and follow me. He went out and followed him. He did not know that it was being done by the angel was real, but he thought he was seeing a vision. When he had passed the first and second guard, they came to the iron gate leading into the city. It opened for them on its own accord, and went out and went along one street, and immediately the angel left him. When Peter came to himself, he said, I am not sure that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from the hand of Herod and from all the Jewish people were expecting. When he realized this, he went into the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose name was Mark, where many were gathered and were praying. You could easily read right through that, but what was the church doing? They were praying for him. They believed that their prayers would be heard by God. It takes faith to believe that, especially in a dark hour. It takes faith to believe that those prayers will be answered. Verse 13 says, when he knocked at the door of the gateway, a servant girl named Rhoda came to answer. Recognizing Peter's voice, in her joy, she did not open the gate, but ran in and reported Peter was standing at the gate. They said to her, you are out of your mind, but she kept insisting that it was so, and kept saying, it is his angel. But Peter continued knocking, and they opened, and they saw him and were amazed. So they were, almost sound like they were spazzing out, to say it in a kind of a comical way. Because, all they knew was he was going to die. They didn't realize that their answered prayer was standing at the door knocking. Think about that. Think about that for a minute. Motioning to them with his hand to be silent, he described to them how the Lord had brought him out of prison. He said, "Tell these things to James and to the brothers." And he departed and went to another place. Now when day came, there was no little disturbance among the soldiers over what had become of Peter. And after Herod searched for him and did not find him, he examined the sentries in order that they be put to death. Then he went down to Judea, to Caesarea, to spend some time there. So God wasn't finished with Peter yet. He still had work for Peter to do. Now after this, did Peter hush up and quit preaching? Absolutely not. He was doing it again. That is faith and strength and courage. We can learn from that, can't we? We can learn from that, because right now it's not a crime in the U.S. right now. Doesn't mean it always will be like it. Not according to the Scriptures. If we look on the news right now, we can actually see the building blocks of persecution. There's whole movements out here right now that hate anything to do with Christianity. They don't want to be told sin is wrong. That their lifestyles, whatever they're doing, it's not a single thing here. They don't want to be told that God says you're not to do it that way. We're seeing it. We've lasted this long because of those 3 documents I mentioned earlier. God inspired our founders to write those. Is it any coincidence that this nation is where the churches of God were based and sent the message out to the world? The one nation that had that freedom to be able to do that. However, with the right political movement and the stacking of courts, scheming, lying, and cheating, and educating children in a manner that is our founders would not recognize, those 3 documents can easily be dismissed. Now, I'm a Star Wars fan. I love it. I can't help it. But in the 3rd saga, when the evil Emperor Palpatine takes over and becomes a dictator, Padme Amidala says these words. She says, "So this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause, because the whole chamber was deceived." Can it happen here? Yeah, it can. We have movements on the rise right now that would do away with all of it. Remember, it wasn't very long ago we heard a political party talk about stacking the Supreme Court so they could get their way. Don't forget that. People out here will protest whatever they're told to protest. They will scream "No kings" and have no idea what they're even yelling. It's sad. It's sad that education has failed them this bad, that they have no idea what civics is, they have no idea what role of government is. All they know is what the mainstream media feeds them. That's all they know. I can't help it. I wrote it in here. I wasn't going to say it, but I'm going to anyway. I can't help it. They're so brainwashed, and I've said this before, that if Donald Trump got up there and said breathing oxygen is awesome, it is beautiful, everybody should do it. I mean, how great is oxygen? Out in front of the White House, there'd be people putting Walmart sacks over their head and tying them and breathing, just to show that oxygen's bad. That is how silly America has become. People say there's no way a nation could go from freedom to tyranny. Well, if you don't know history, yeah, you're 100% right. But if you know what 1930s and 40s Germany looked like, you would see what happens to a highly educated society of how things can change and change like this. The sad part is these people that support all of this stuff, who don't even know what a fascist actually is, they don't realize that when these leaders are done with them, they do away with them. Hence the brown shirts in Germany. People, they don't care because they don't know history. I saw professors argue that math is racist. Now, I don't even know how you can argue that, but they literally said mathematics is racist. To me, it's more racist saying that somebody, because of the color of their skin, has trouble with mathematics. To me, that is racist, not the math. Because the math is the same no matter what color you are, your nationality, your sexual orientation, anything, whatever it is. 2 + 2 is 4, and there's no getting away from that. But that's the nation we live in. And these are what's coming up to take the places of those who know better. So for the church, we have to have faith and strength and courage, don't we? Every time I talk about this subject, I have to go to Joshua, the 1st chapter. I've always got to go there, because I think it's vital for us to understand what he's saying. In Joshua, the 1st chapter, beginning at verse 1, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses. From the wilderness in this Lebanon, as far as the great river to the river Euphrates, all of the land of the Hittites and the great sea toward the going down of the sun shall be your territory. No man will be able to stand before you all of the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so will I be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the law that Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left hand, that you may have success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth. You shall meditate on it day and night, that you may be careful to do according to all that is written. For then you will make your way prosperous, and you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened, and do not be dismayed, for the eternal your God is with you wherever you go. Those same promises he told Joshua apply to each and every one in God's church today. All we have to do is claim them. Human emotions can get in the way and blind us sometimes on that. We can worry and fret. It's natural human emotions. But we have to get away from that. And I'm speaking to myself as much as anybody else. And remember these promises, because he said he'll never leave us nor forsake us. And he also said if you do not depart from his word, you will prosper. And I've never met anybody who doesn't. And people would say, well, does that mean getting rich? That's not what it means. It means you'll have a good life, I think. I think that's more of it. And all of us in here have way more than we could ever need. God has blessed us so well. So very, very well. So to go with faith and courage is not to depart from God's laws and commandments. And that is what nominal Christianity teaches their congregations to do, is to leave the law and commandments. But there's no command to do that. None. That's how we build our faith, is living in God's way of life. And claiming the promise He'll be with us no matter where we go. We find that in Acts the 23rd chapter when Paul is brought up on charges. Acts the 23rd chapter beginning at verse 1. It said, "In looking intently at the council, Paul said, 'Brothers, I have lived my life before God in all good conscience up to this day.' And the high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him to strike him in the mouth." What did he say so wrong there? So if he was living in God's way and the high priest was offended, then who wasn't living in the way? That's how we look at it. And remember, who did Jesus have trouble with? Did He have trouble with the Romans? You would say, well, they crucified Him. Well, they did, but they did what they was told to do. He always treated them with respect because they didn't know any better. But the ones who were supposed to know better, He called them what they were because they were full of themselves and enforcing their rules and laws on everybody else. It said in verse 3, "Then Paul said to him, 'God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. Are you sitting to judge me according to the law? And yet contrary to your law, you ordered me to be struck.' Then those who stood by said, 'Would you revile God's high priest?' And Paul said, 'I do not know, brothers, that he was the high priest. For it is written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people.' And now Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees. And he cried out in the council, 'Brothers, I am a Pharisee, a son of Pharisees, and with this respect and the hope and resurrection of the dead that I am on trial.'" You got to love it. You got to love it. I could hear them arguing just like Democrats and Republicans argue, can't you? They took the bait. And we'll read it because it says, "And when he had said this, a dissension rose between the Pharisees and Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. Where the Sadducees say there is no resurrection, nor angel, nor spirit, but the Pharisees acknowledge them all. Then a great clamor arose as some of the scribes of the Pharisees' party stood up and contended sharply, 'We find nothing wrong with this man. What if a spirit or an angel spoke to him?' And when the dissension became violent, the tribune, afraid that Paul would be torn to pieces by them, commanded the soldiers to go down and take him away from among them by force and to bring him into the barracks. The following night the Lord stood by him and said, 'Take courage, for as you have testified to the facts about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify in Rome.'" That's where I wanted to get to. Paul had to stand before his own people, but God had a huge plan for him. And we all know what is all centered in Rome. You know, it was the pagan capital of the world back then. And Paul was chosen by God directly to go there and tell them about Him. That would take courage, wouldn't it? A lot of it. Right now in the U.S., we don't see a lot of this persecution like we read of. But I asked Grok, for anybody that don't know, that's the AI that Elon Musk is associated with. And I was going to use it for the whole thing, but it timed me out, so I couldn't. It doesn't do that on the phone, but it did it on the desktop for some reason. I asked it the question, what nations ban Christianity? That was my question. And it says, no country has an outright blanket ban on Christianity written into law in the sense of criminalizing the mere existence of Christian identity everywhere. However, in several nations, open practice, public worship, evangelism, especially to Muslims, conversion to Islam, apostasy, or possession and distribution of Bibles and Christian materials is illegal or effectively prohibited, often carrying severe penalties like imprisonment, torture, execution, or social ostracism. In practice, this makes Christianity underground or impossible to exercise freely. Countries with the strictest restrictions effectively banned or near total suppression. These are consistently ranked at the top of reports like the Open Doors World Watch List in 2026 for extreme persecution. Anybody want to take a guess the very first country? I'll give you a hint. Donald Trump called him the Rocket Man. But North Korea. North Korea. I don't know how it says that this isn't, that it wasn't illegal, because to my knowledge it is. But North Korea, Christianity is treated as treason against the state ideology. Owning a Bible, meeting secretly, or being discovered as a Christian can lead to execution, forced labor camps, imprisonment for a believer and their entire family. There is no meaningful religious freedom. The regime demands total loyalty to the Kim family. This is widely regarded as the world's most dangerous place for Christians. Afghanistan under Taliban rule. It's because of apostasy, because it's a Muslim nation. So if you leave Islam, then they consider you an apostate. And it means often violence or execution. Somalia. Conversion from Islam is illegal and can result in death. Christians, a tiny minority, face execution by extremist groups like Al-Shabaab if discovered. Public practice or churches are non-existent. Saudi Arabia, public practice of any non-Islamic religion is forbidden. No churches or public Christian worship is allowed. Importing Bibles or Christian materials can lead to arrest. Private worship by foreign workers is sometimes tolerated but heavily restricted. Apostasy and proselytizing are illegal. Yemen is similar to Somalia and Saudi Arabia. The Maldives, you don't think about the Maldives because everything you see, that's where all the huts are on that beautiful water. You don't think of it. That's actually a Muslim nation. You don't realize it a lot of times. But public practice of Christianity is prohibited. Iran, do I even need to read anything? We know it's illegal in Iran. Libya, the same thing. Other countries with high restrictions and I never could hardly say this. Eritrea, the one that is broken off of Somalia. So then I turned around because anybody would say, yeah, but these are Islamic nations. Obviously Christianity's not allowed because that's two religions fighting each other in a way. It's how it would be looked at. So I asked the question because I remembered the news article. I asked, I think this one's still grok. I said, can a person in the UK be arrested for praying outside of an abortion clinic? Because I remembered the article. Yes, a person was convicted in the UK, now listen, for silently praying within an abortion clinic buffer zone, also known as a safe zone or public space protection order area. In October 2024, Adam Smith Connor, an Army veteran, was convicted by Poole Magistrates Court for breaching a public spaces protection order. It says here are the key details regarding the incident. The action, Smith Connor was praying silently with his head bowed for his deceased son near a British Pregnancy Advisory Service clinic. He was found guilty of violating the PSPO that bans activities in approval or disapproval of abortion, including protest and prayer. He was handed a 2-year conditional discharge in order to pay over £9,000 in prosecution costs. He has announced his intention to appeal the conviction, arguing a silent prayer should not be a crime. What was he guilty of? Who was he harassing? He was not speaking audibly. I didn't look this, but if I remember correctly, it said praying for his son because I believe the woman he impregnated had an abortion, I think. I believe that's correct. Now, it offered this. Other related incidents. Isabel Von Spruce, a pro-lifer campaigner who was arrested twice in 22 and 23 for silent prayer in Birmingham. Charges were dropped, and she later received a £13,000 payout for wrongful arrest and a police apology. Wow, imagine that. She became the first person charged under the new National Buffer Zone law. And there was a priest named Sean Go. He was charged for holding a sign reading "Praying for Freedom of Speech" within a buffer zone. So they don't have true freedom of speech, do they? You can be as innocent or obnoxious in this nation as you want to be because of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. Some of it you hate to see, but you know if it's restricted, then other speech can be restricted. So then I asked another question, and this one's Google. I asked, can you be arrested for preaching in Canada? There are 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. 3 of them, because I've got to watch how I say this or I'll get flagged. During the pandemic, they claimed they broke health orders because they went ahead and kept preaching and meeting for services, so the pastors were arrested. Another one named David Lynn was arrested in 2019 while street preaching in Toronto for allegedly causing a disturbance. I don't know the details. I just looked these up quickly. And a Derek Raymer in Calgary was arrested multiple times in 2023 for protesting against drag queen story time events in Calgary public places. So can you be arrested in Christian nations for upholding a Christian belief? Yes, you can. It's what separates the United States from other nations. Those 3 documents is the only reason we have freedom. It's the only reason. So it's not just countries with dictators or a national religion. So we can see that it is coming. It'll hit here last because they have to get those documents out of the way to make it work. So I'd encourage anyone that hears this in the States to appreciate those 3 founding documents because they mean everything to this nation. I believe they were God-inspired. I really do. Now, I believe if the founders could see what we're going through now, they may have been more pacific in some areas, maybe. But all in all, that's what has kept us free. So we should cherish them. I'm not going to lie to you. Looking at them, I was very humbled, to say the least, knowing that I was standing in front of a document that these men had signed, and the bravery that they went about, and the faith that they had that God would see the cause through. Kids today in a lot of areas are seemingly taught something different than what those documents teach. I've saw videos where the teachers union called for strikes, not with teachers, but kids. So the teachers would lead kids out to protest. That's not a teacher's job. The teacher's job is just to tell the facts. It's supposed to be the same thing with the news media. But everything now is polarized and politicized. We hate to see the rising hate and discontent that's in the land, but there's nothing we can do about it other than make a statement that it shouldn't be like that, and there's a better day coming. So we enjoy this freedom while we can. Love it, live our lives, and have work on developing the faith and courage that these patriarchs had, and the apostles had, and Jesus himself had. And be ready for whatever may come until Jesus comes and restores the whole world.